Okay, we're going to take our seats. And Dan, I think we're now going to start talking about options, what we've all been waiting for. Like, we're really excited and anticipatory about what we're going to hear. Great.
I think you might be able to hear me better if I don't hold this, but if you need me to speak up, let me know. I think the last presentation I gave, I was running over time, and as soon as I ended it, the fellow that asked me to speak said, "You can't predict the quiet ones; they always take too long." So I've wrote out some thoughts on the process, on where we're going, on my expectations, on what I think we need to deliver to you today. But over the course of this morning, I've had some additional thoughts. So before I get into my sort of prepared remarks, I just want to go over a couple of process things. We may run out of time. We may not hear your question. Your question may change after you've heard somebody else speak and be responded to. I'm going to pass this around while we're talking, while the presentations are going. Write down your question. My goal today is to make sure that we hear your questions and we have a chance to answer them, and we try and give you coherent, consistent answers. People on our team are going to answer the same question differently. We all have different experiences. We all have different hopes. We all have different dreams and concerns. Feel free to write it down. If you want to take a piece of paper out of that pad and keep it and continue to write them down, hand it to me at the end. And our team will take a look at all of them, put them together, and try and create a FAQ. Right? Frequently asked questions, and we'll publish it. And we'll continue this conversation. Yeah, just keep passing around, or rip the pad in half and create two. I really wanted to help with the insurance claim, but I can't. My company, my employer, insures the building, and there's a conflict. So I chose to help in another way by volunteering for the Blue Sky team. And I said to Laura, "Are you okay if I do this? This is going to be probably a couple hours a week." And then I was asked to consider leading the team, and I said, "What do you think? Is that?" She said, "No, that's not enough." I said, "Well, what do you think? Like 5 hours? 5 hours a week?" She's kind of silent. And she's been on the FAMCHI committee, and I had no idea what I was in for. But it's been a trip, and I'm happy to have been on it. And I didn't really understand the role at first, but about a month into this role, Nathan gave a presentation on finances to the church over at Bethel. And it dawned on me that there will be a time coming very soon that I'll be up there speaking, and I better start preparing. And here I am. We're going to break for lunch after we do the presentations. There's a whole bunch of tables. There's a whole bunch of team members. Try and save a seat for one team member so that we can listen to the conversation. We can pick up the piece we need to respond to, or you can ask us a question. That would be great. All right. Last bit. To my team members, we've agreed to disagree. We've agreed to work together. We've agreed to be constructive. I want my team members to feel that they too can answer questions, ask questions, not answer, but ask their questions during this presentation. Everybody is participating in this, and we're not just here to moderate. I thanked you briefly this morning, but I want to say thank you again for participating, for sharing your time, for the time leading up to this day, for committing the hours this morning, for your desires, your dreams, and all of your concerns. It's been just over 4 months since our first meeting on February 5th. And since that time, the Blue Sky We've met a couple dozen times. We've interviewed current and prior staff. We've held listening sessions. We've conducted surveys. We've gone on field trips to learn about other structures and about architecture. We've interviewed other churches. We've met with architects, contractors, and developers. We've reviewed very detailed plans. We've developed conceptual plans. We hosted speakers and nonprofits to discuss local needs and supporting missions. We developed flyers. We posted events on Facebook. We wrote short articles in the Carillon. We made announcements, and we blew up balloons to get your attention, to get your input, and to convey information back to you. After all that, and many hundreds of emails I can attest to, we came up with several concise summaries and our collective values. And as soon as I'm done with this, I'll have Brian come up and talk about the values. He did most of the data analysis with Emma Fuji, and he's going to share a little bit. So our presentation is based on the values discerned from your input, from your research, from our collective efforts to review all the ideas and comments we've gathered. We're excited, really, and pleased to have your attention again today to share the concepts we've come up with for Reimagined Pilgrim Hall and more. This leadership role was and remains quite a learning experience. I've met many of you through this process. I've deepened friendships. I've appreciated the depth of the church and the individual. I've learned about the church that after coming to infrequently and irregularly for 14 years, I've decided to join. Thank you. I've learned about staff, and I've learned about First Church's incredible history of giving, caring, sustaining, and inviting. Most importantly, I've learned that everyone present, and even those who can't attend today and that emailed me their concerns, everyone here and not here cares about First Church. I've heard a great number of differing voices about how we each might repair, sustain, build, or continue to grow the church. And where we differ in opinions of the best course forward, I believe we all want the same thing: to continue as a strong and healthy body, family, congregation, and community. There is no right or wrong dream today. There are no right or wrong concerns or worries. The process will unfold with your collective support for a plan. Some of you are going to find this plan either too small or too big, too expensive, too conservative, or even too risky. Some of you will see this plan fall in between and feel comforted by the path that's been chosen. All of us are going to contribute to the plan. There's a lot at stake, and many big decisions lay ahead. There's going to be dust, there's going to be delays, there's going to be noise and trucks and workers, there's going to be bills, building permits, and then there's going to be celebration. It's going to be over. The very minimum outcome is a building behind us that is almost entirely new. It'll be greatly improved. It's going to include current critical life and safety improvements. We're going to have new walls, floors. We'll have a roof again. We'll have new paint and carpet. We'll have new furniture. We'll have a new kitchen and new offices. It's going to be grand, really. I could see it. It will be more energy efficient. It will have an elevator. It will have accessible entrances. It will have accessible bathrooms. It's going to have much more, so much more, and we will be so grateful to have recovered from this major hurdle in the life of the church, just as the congregation before us survived the prior fires. That's the minimum. That's where we get to go. I typically guide very similar fire damage claims in my work without the personal investment, without the opportunity to enjoy moving back in. without realizing what might be my dream. Again, I'm excited and I'm optimistic about our opportunity here for positive change. I know many of you are also excited about this process. What we ask of you today is to dream with the Blue Sky team, to dream with staff, to dream with the person next to you and across the room. Just make eye contact with somebody across the room. We're all dreaming in this together. We should consider the people that will come after us and sustain our vision because of the choices we will make. And to dream not only about your own idea or about the 3 concepts we present today, or your one concept in your mind already, but we urge you to consider all the paths and share your vision for the future and constructively contribute to this process and participate in the next steps over the summer. We are asking for an open mind, patience, and participation. We're headed for change. In fact, the Blue Sky team was tasked to contemplate change. And today we are dreaming and are here to consider how much change do we want to embrace. At a minimum, everything next door will be different. The brick has to come down to complete repairs. Will we reuse the brick? Will the building even look the same? Will the familiar main entrance greet us once more? We're going to have new keys and a fresh start. How much change do we want? Do we envision? How much change are we willing to pay for? Do we need a larger kitchen? Do we need a music rehearsal room? Do we need a kitchenette and a break room for staff? Do we need affordable housing for staff? If we say yes to these questions, do we need a 4th floor? That's all about change. We won't have asbestos. We won't have lead paint. We won't have inaccessible bathrooms and entrances. We won't have seismically brittle brick walls. We won't have to do any maintenance for a while. It'll be new. We probably won't have any excess money in the bank. So how do we evaluate the 3 concepts presented today? How will we choose a path? So the Blue Sky team came up with a number of criteria, and I want to share this with you today. Would you flip the board? Renzo, would you flip the board for me, or Scott? So the first criteria, and these are not in any specific order. No one is more important than the other, although we may disagree on that point. Community needs, financial sustainability, environmental sustainability, opportunities for ministries, the opportunity to flourish and grow, aesthetics, time, the safety of ourselves, our children, our community, oppressed people, and our mission, not today, but 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100 years from now. Those are the criteria that we'd like you to consider as we have this discussion. How do we communicate our desires for this process, for this option? When can I ask questions and share ideas and concerns? That's today. We'll be presenting 3 options, and we'll have a Q&A after each one. And we may not get to all the questions. Your question may change. Take the pad, pass it around, talk to us during lunch, email us. We welcome all of your input. The insurance policy does not cover our complete loss. Milton has informed us we have inadequate coverage and may have substantial uncovered loss. That is due to a nearly 100-year-old building and extensive building code requirements that will be factored in at a very minimum in our new building. We also have uncovered loss for income and for extra expense. The final cost is unknown, and it will not be determined until the building is actually repaired or replaced. When we enter the door, we'll know how much it costs. Over the course of the summer, the Fire Recovery Committee will present a claim to the insurers for the theoretical cost to repair the building in compliance with the minimum requirements. The insurance companies will review this claim, and they will adjust the loss. An agreement will be reached for the theoretical value of the cost of repairs, and then we'll find out if it was accurate a few years later. The recovery will be determined by the Fire Recovery Committee and the insurers. We'll find out what the theoretical cost is and what we expect to receive over the next few months. There may be other factors that reduce our uncovered loss, including potential recovery against the roofers that may have started the fire. The Fire Recovery Committee is working to answer such questions. The three concepts presented today will help us collectively narrow our choices and pursue a path to improve Pilgrim Hall. You may or may not like the concepts shown for any number of reasons that I've alluded to. You may like them all and be faced with abundance and indecision. The purpose of the three concepts is to present a range of opportunities. With each choice, we will consider the criteria. With each choice, we will try to provide a range in both time and cost to completion. Those numbers are very rough at the moment, but we will do our best to provide a range. Where possible, we will consider revenue streams. All of these concepts introduced today will be deliberated and considered. At the end of our day, you'll place a sticky dot or dots on your preferences. There is no right or wrong. I predict the dots will vary and reflect the diversity of our congregation. The building concepts shown today are but one iteration of our potential path. With your input and your participation, we will try to quickly identify a path together. If time and money are the most important, perhaps we might resist changing the size, the flow, the purpose of the building. And yet, we are going to have a wonderfully familiar and greatly improved Pilgrim Hall if we just repair it. If supporting our music program and performances are important to us, then we might choose to create a dedicated rehearsal space. That's change. If children and youth classrooms are important, might we move them out of the basement? If the thrift shop is still important to us, we can continue to allocate dedicated space for its operation, weaving our congregation together. If providing services for the winter shelter homeless, if that's important, might we choose to construct showers and laundry for our overnight guests? If expanding our food mission is something that gathered the single most responses in our surveys, not only for interest, but for direct volunteer and engagement, might we build a larger kitchen to fulfill that desire? If outdoor space is important, we might choose to build a rooftop garden. If immigrant services are high on our list, perhaps we will choose to build space for the East Bay Sanctuary Covenant and an ESL classroom. If affordable housing tops our list, might we build staff apartments atop Pilgrim Hall? These are choices. If helping others less fortunate is important to us, perhaps we will decide that surface parking lots serve no great value, and building an affordable housing structure could make a lasting impact on dozens of families for years to come in our immediate community. It's something to consider. If community support is important, as we all believe it is, we might create a 24-hour chapel, a place for people to come and pray. Whatever we choose We'll evaluate it together as one, as a whole, listening to everyone and considering the criteria. That's our task today. Thank you all for coming and for participating.
Thank you. I'm Brian Houck. I'll just talk briefly about some of the things we learned as we went through our listening, through our surveys, and through our a variety of discussions and ways of hearing from all of you. We've given a lot of this back to you in different formats, and here are a number of the things that we've seen in our values. There are probably two concepts that came up most often in these fora, and the two concepts were community and oasis. Community came up in a number of ways. First of all, how do we create a space that's, active and vibrant like all of us are, right, for this community right here? And then how do we make it more open and accessible to people who want to come, and accessible in every sense of that word? How do we make it visible, make the community aspect of what we are visible, so that people walking by and around this building know who we are and view us as a community that they can be part of? And third, the other part of community that we heard a lot of was all the partnerships that we have, and how do we make this space a viable way for building that aspect of our community with flexible spaces that people can use for different kinds of meetings and different kinds of purposes. But the other side of this that we heard was about Oasis, right? That we are a place in a community of worship. We are a place to retreat, a place with a library that people love to retreat to, a place where we feel like we can experience God in the middle of the East Bay. And so we heard a lot of things about, the experience of light in these spaces, a feeling of security, both for our children and for all of us, and just the sort of ways of incorporating the ways that we experience God into this space, many of which have to do with, the integration of our outside world and this building that we're creating. So as we're looking at these options today, I think these two concepts kept coming up in a lot of our discussions, and to the extent they help guide us about what we're looking for, that may be helpful. Thank you.
That's all they get to see? So this slide will give you a very quick overview of the three pathways, options that we're going to present today. I'll give you just a moment to read it, and then I'll sort of talk about each one. Option one is a great choice. It's the minimum effort to go back with time and cost. How quickly can we get back there? How little extra funds do we have to pay for? That is a viable option. It's a wonderful option, and the building will be new, right? So if that's your dream, embrace it and share it. Mo's going to talk to that dream. The expanded option, Pilgrim Hall expanded. Sorry, these names have changed many times over as we've added and reduced the number of options and tried to stay on path. We engaged an architect that's very familiar with this building, Ratcliffe. They designed the building. They did the organ. They've done other work for this congregation. We asked them to provide an example of what could be done, of what could change. And they very carefully came up with a concept that fits within the original shell of the building. It's no bigger, it's no smaller from the outside, but it has an additional 5,500 square feet. And you'll see that in detail as Lorenzo walks you through what changes were made and how the building changed. That is a concept. It's a workable concept. It considers the existing foundation, the existing footprint, the existing walls, the existing limitations in that building behind us that don't change in order to save some money, but it adds quite a bit, and it comes with a substantial increased cost. So Lorenzo will walk you through that today. There could be a choice between option number 1 and option number 2. Some of the slides will reflect, for option number 2, an increase of 10,000 square feet and $10 million. Maybe the concept number 2 that we've had visualized for you isn't big enough, doesn't fulfill your dream. We'll talk about that. You'll ask questions about that. Option number 3 has to do with building affordable housing. We have 2 people that are experts on the topic, Amy and Scott, and they're going to speak to you today. Mo is an expert at building affordable housing. He's done it. He's working on it now. We've considered an option to do that on top of Pilgrim Hall. It's a difficult place to do it with severe limitations and little financial incentive, along with a very heavy burden. And Scott can explain those in detail as we go through it. We've considered the option of replacing the surface parking lot around Durant and replacing Durant itself with an affordable housing structure of more than 50 units with some parking. And we're going to talk about that today. We'll talk about the resources necessary to do it, the cost, the revenue, and so forth. We'll go through all 3 of these in detail. The presentation times may vary, but we've allocated at least 20 minutes to answer questions following each. If you don't have time for your question or your question changes, keep the pad passing and write it down, or email us, ask us at lunch, or write your own piece of paper and just hand it to us at the close. With that, Mo, would you start with option number 1? You want to hold it or walk?
Well, just take this here. Okay, so this works, yes. I am Mo Wright. I am not on the Blue Sky Committee. I am on the Fire Recovery Committee, and I've been helping with rebuilding the sanctuary to get it back in business. And I've also been, thank you. And as you know, I've been a member of the church for a long time and know a lot of the history and so on. And it has been a discovery time for me to look at the plans and look and see what our ancestors had in mind when they put this place together. And it's different than it is now. So here's a Google map look at our campus. As you can see, this right here is Pilgrim Hall. This is the sanctuary. We've got the Plymouth House over here in the chapel. And then the parking lot, which sort of zigzags through here. I guess the next slide shows the lots, right? So we'll go to there. So the way that this is set up is that there is one large lot here that Plymouth House Chapel Sanctuary and Pilgrim Hall is on. It probably used to be a bunch of little lots, probably like this size, here, 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 but they were all combined at some point after the church bought the building, bought the property. The sanctuary was built first. This building was built first. It is made out of steel and brick for the most part. There's some wood framing in it too, but the main structure is a steel frame building. Pilgrim Hall is a wood frame building, despite the fact that it looks like it has bricks on it. It has bricks on the outside. They're attached to the wood frame of the building. So these 2 buildings up here, which we're really not talking about, are a combination of steel and brick too. So they're pretty substantial buildings. So you can see here we have this one big lot, and we have these other lots over here. We'll be talking about those lots and sort of at the third option. But right now, let's look at this lot. It was rezoned about 5 years ago when they did the South Side plan. and this whole area was rezoned for to be more kind of dense residential mixed use. So our use on this property is permitted under the current code. So it's even if we do something drastic and tear things down, we're still we won't lose the ability to do what we need to do. One of the things that is salient about this is that you can see that the open space in our lot is really just the courtyard in the front, this lawn and so on. There's very little space around the building. It's pretty much built out almost to the property lines at all sides. So we're allowed to go 55%, but we are actually 65%. So that there are implications for if we end up taking any building down, we would have to deal with the zoning laws as to how much lot coverage we could have to put it back up. We also are allowed to go another story on our building if we wanted to. So that is, we could do that, and if there are certain circumstances where we could even go higher. So let's go to the next slide here. So anyway, we're gonna mostly talk about Pilgrim Hall, but I just wanted to kind of get it to you in the context. The Pilgrim Hall was built second after this building. It was built right the year afterwards, and one of the things that they did was they built this portion of the wall is shared with this building. So they put steel columns inside of this wall, that wall back there, and they attached them to it so that the building is kind of a lean-to some degree onto the sanctuary building. And also when they built it, I guess let's look at the next slide here. When they built it, it was originally made for mostly athletics, the basketball court, and it was not the uses there. There were no staff offices to speak of. There were some, but not nearly as much as it is used now. Obviously no thrift shop or anything, but it was mostly for the activities of the church and not as a community building as we have learned to use it. So this is just kind of going over here. We're high density area. The lot coverage 50 to 55%. We are now about 65% of it. There is the parking requirement in Berkeley is trying to encourage people to use public transportation. So if we were to build any residential space on this property, we would not be required to provide parking spaces. But if we increase the amount of commercial space, we would have to have one space for every 500 square feet. I think that we would, because we have our existing parking lot, we would probably not be restricted by that. So let's go to the next one here. So some of the issues that are going to come up, and no matter what option we choose, are this landmarks and preservation issue. If we do end up substantially changing the outside of our building or removing any portions of it, we will have to go through a process that involves public hearings and so on. We're not actually a landmark on any register, but we are a building of note, and there could be a process that others go and attempt to make this building a landmark, a local landmark. So we do have preservationists right next door. Baja is in the building that is right next to our parking lot. We do have a legal right to get an exemption from historic preservation laws. However, it would mean still could be challenged in court, and it could take quite a while. For those of you that were around when the Presbyterians did their expansion, they spent at least 3 or so years fighting preservation battles. So the next slide. So no matter what we do, no matter what option we choose, we're going to have to make it comply to code. If we were to remove the building completely and build a new building, it would be 100% of the current code. We're going to have to provide something less than that. Every part that we rebuild has to meet the new code, but not every part of the building that is untouched needs to meet the new code, but it will be substantially upgraded. It will not meet the new seismic codes, but it will have probably meet almost all of the accessibility codes in terms of, ramps and doorways and elevators and that kind of thing. We have determined that the building, even to rebuild the upper story that has been damaged so severely, that we would have to beef up the foundation because it's currently substandard. So no matter what, we're going to have to add some additional strength to the foundation. We'll have to comply with the new Cal Green requirements of energy efficiency. And as I said, it won't be fully up to code, but it will be substantially better than the building was the day before the fire. Option one really anticipates that we would rebuild Pilgrim Hall using the existing exterior walls with a similar floor plan. Now, by its nature, putting in new bathrooms and an elevator, we're going to have to change the floor plan a little bit. But we would, it's sort of an incremental thing to start changing a little wall here, a little wall there, and adapting the building to it. There's a continuum between just replacing what we have to do all the way to replacing the whole building. And there are all kinds of things in between that we could fix that we've noticed as we lived in this building, but option one sort of thinks of it as more or less just replacing and changing the floor plan to accommodate the new code upgrades and accessibility. We would be required to put a new wall to support its own building, so in case this building was ever removed or damaged, they wouldn't depend upon each other. It also is an earthquake issue in that this building will react differently than that building, and we don't want to have them tearing each other apart. It will have increased seismic strength, but it will not meet the current fairly stringent seismic code. So the next slide here. So this is just to kind of familiarize you a little bit about what is going on here. After looking at this building and looking at the other building, I think that I'm not sure what exactly happened, but the Pilgrim Hall was not built to the same kind of more rigid standards. It's a wood frame building, and they compromised a number of things. One of the things that is a little weird is that there's underneath the large assembly, there's just a big mound of dirt. It seemed like, why didn't they just excavate that and use the space? But whatever, they didn't. And so one of the ideas that we'll be seeing is, why don't we just dig it out and use it instead of, because it's surrounded by walls and foundations and everything. Anyway, that's kind of unusual. And then also, it does relate. The floors and everything relate to the other building. They knew exactly how it was going to be done. I think the two buildings were probably designed around the same time. So the next one here, we would have to put, this is where the wall would go between Pilgrim Hall, and there would be a little gap between the two buildings. It's if you think of it, the floor plans, it's sort of, the basement is a sort of a U shape, and then the main floor goes all the way across, and then the upstairs is sort of a U shape. So it's, in order to get that big light open feeling room it sacrifices quite a bit of space. But there are some ways to, work with that, as you will see in the next expanded version. So just the summary of benefits is that it would be the shortest project time. I mean, we don't have to go through any big public hearings or anything about the way the thing would look. We would be able to, just get a building permit if we didn't change too much on the outside. It would be less costly than adding more space and digging out mounds of dirt and that kind of thing. We would get some, some upgrades, but not, a fully upgraded modern building. It would be about the same size. The interior would look all completely new. I mean, for some of the pictures you've seen in there, all the plaster has been stripped off. Everything's gone. We would just start from the bare studs, put new finishes on it, new electrical, modern, new floors, carpeting, lighting, everything. So it will all look brand new no matter what we do. It's just a matter of how it's configured inside. So is there another slide or is that it? Okay, clarifying questions. All right, Mary, you want to? Anyway. We can build up to four, and I think it's 50 feet. Yeah. Oh, how many stories could we build? Right now there are. Okay, so the way that it works now is that there are essentially the bottom story is fully on grade at the parking lot, right? And over here on this side, it's underground, right? Because the ground slopes this way. So we could go 4 stories above the ground. We can go down in the ground as deep as we want. So. Does this other mic work?
This one's on.
The question is, do we have a sense of the preservation so far? We have met with the city of Berkeley once when we were trying to find out what level of upgrades would be required for this building. And we were told that, what? Yeah, no, yeah, we were just told by one of the planners that, if we changed anything, there would be, substantially more work. But we have not been approached by anybody that I know of from the preservation community asking any questions.
Check.
Oh, great. Cool.
Could you speak to the state of the bricks on the outside? And there was a guy doing a report or something. Are they reusable? Are they going to have to be taken off and put back? What's the story?
Well, okay, so that's an ongoing investigation. But so in the 20s, the bricks that they put on there are like full bricks, right? And so the ones that are sideways, they're called, sideways and lengthways, are cut. So in a modern building would only use a facing brick, which would only be an inch thick. These are full 4 inches thick, and then there's mortar behind it. They're attached by little wires in there, and it's not very well attached. I mean, it can peel off easily. And there's also a waterproofing membrane behind there that part of it has been burned because of the upper floor. And so we may have to remove all the bricks in order to fix that and also add plywood and shear and this kind of stuff. We're for sure going to have to remove probably the bricks on the upper floor, but we're looking into how to do that. And putting them back on is an expensive thing, but we're going to try to price it and get paid for it by the insurance company. So.
Freddie.
Mo, for the sake of all of those who are concerned about the well-being of our children and our grandchildren, could you please tell us a little bit more about the seismic strengthening that would occur in this plan?
Okay, so can we go, Lorenzo? Can we go back to the picture of the building? The sections? Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so just to kind of answer that question in a broad way, so the seismic strength of the building, it's sort of, we would everything on the upper floor here would be completely up to grade, up to seismic code, okay? We would have to bring the strength to hold that up all the way down to the foundation here, which would probably mean plywood and so on the insides of these walls. But we would not have to make the entire building up to a full seismic strength, because the code says that we're only required to make the replacement parts the exact same code that it is now. So it will be partially. Now we can voluntarily do a lot more, and I think we probably would, because it's relatively easy. It's all opened up now. Putting on more bolts and plywood and so on would be a good thing to do. Yeah, it looks like it. So these red lines here do show what's gone, right? This part from here down has been stripped and so on, but the rest of it up here will have to be removed. So there are parts that are there, but they'll have to be removed. The whole roof, all the walls here, all these trusses that are up in the large assembly will have to be taken down.
Mo, over here. The existing, if we build to this plan, we won't have too much trouble with preservationists and such. If we were to build another story, put another story on, could we do it in such a way that we wouldn't with a preservationist?
There would be for sure more public hearings, and that's a question that depends on how we build it. If it was same Georgian look and everything, it would be. We could do it, yeah.
I was wondering if the fireplace that's presently was in the small assembly would go away, and also those chimneys that stick up that can fall down in seismic events, are they going to go away?
Well, we would have to, because they were previously restrained by the roof, and I think that we would have to do some additional reinforcement to them if we were to lead them. They are almost a decorative feature, of the building.
Mo, just in rough numbers, can you tell us approximate cost and approximate time?
Well, actually, that's a slide coming up, but I'll give you a preview. So we think it's about $6 million to replace the building, as we talked about with the upgrades. And it will take about a year to get the permits and so on and draw it all up. And then about at least, 18 months or so to build out the building.
Do you have any idea of where the elevator would be in connection with all of this?
Somewhere near a door to get in. I think I'm almost out of time here, so maybe we need to go to the next one.
A few more questions.
We'll have lots of time for questions at the end, too.
How close to like a gold or platinum LEED level would this building get us if we just go by the Berkeley building codes?
How close to what?
LEED, the
Environmental ratings.
Yeah.
How
In
close
other
to
words,
what?
if we just
Green. Oh, green. Well, let's see. There's a lot of definitions of the green buildings, but okay, the current code, which California adopted, for short, it's called Cal Green, essentially makes almost all buildings a LEED silver or gold, as it used to be told, without all the documentation, but there's higher insulation requirements, higher efficiency lighting, high efficiency heating systems. So it's pretty darn green. I mean, it would be, a lot more, way more efficient than that building was, in September of last year. So maybe we need to do the next group here, but.
Hi, Mo. I wondered if the issues of historic preservation are linked with the need for community meetings. In other words, when in initial slide you talked about needing to have the neighborhood review plans, and would that happen no matter which plan we have, or only if we deviate from the current frame?
Okay, so there is in Berkeley. There's something called the Landmarks Commission, which is the one that deals with preservation issues. If you're not changing anything on the outside of the building, you don't go through them. There may be at least one level of design review, which would be done by the staff at the planning department. But if we didn't really change anything out on the outside, there would be no public hearing about that, but there would be a design review. In any case.
Good morning, Mo. Right here, Constance.
Right.
Hey, what's up? So,
Constance.
I have a question about the bricks, because we
Bricks.
kind of mentioned it, kind of not. So, if we don't use the bricks, can we sell them? No, I'm being serious.
Those bricks are all covered with mortar. I mean, maybe we can sell them to members of the congregation for sentimental value, but they're nobody. They would look like a pile of bricks,
So we're going to move on to the next group.
Could I just ask one clarifying final question of Mo? Mo, you commented on the time frame. Could you just restate that? Did I hear 1 year for permits and a year and a half for construction?
The time frame is going to be, we're going to compare all the different options, money, time, this and that. So, when you're familiar with the options, you'll see the different time.
Check, I'm good? All right, I've been asked to enunciate well, so, but I have a lot of slides to go through, so I might talk a little fast. I'm Lorenzo Nanillo. In my current professional iteration, as many of you witnessed, I've gone through a couple of them already. But I am now back to forensic architecture, working with a architecture and engineering consultancy in San Francisco, primarily doing building envelope design. So that gave me a particularly good position in serving the Fire Recovery Committee as well as Blue Sky team. But I got the rare luxury of being able to work with Mo on the subcommittee for the Fire Recovery Committee, Mo and Roger Bash, to be there through the building process weekly, and that's been a joy, actually. That's been really wonderful to be able to be in that position.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Yay, thank you, you're welcome. And this might work. If I have to get down here, that's fine. Or not. Yeah, go to the next slide. So, as Mo mentioned, this building behind us was built about 90 years ago. And it was designed for programs that were developed 90 years ago, maybe even 100 years ago. They had to anticipate what they wanted at that point in time. And they did the best job that they could for what they were going to build. And they met their needs. Option 2 is born of an idea of what we think now is going to happen for the next 100 years, hence the title of the program. And it comes from just planning. It comes from the idea of being a master builder, an architect. You envision what might have the building become, and you design it and you build it that way. But where you start there is you go back to your values, what we determine through listening to people, what we understand is the mission of the church. And we go through these values, and you look at better entrances, accessibility, flexibility, connected indoor, outdoor spaces, more natural light. All of these things are the parameters that an architect will use to understand what the space is going to look like. So if you think about what Mo introduced, the idea of just maybe utilizing this space a little bit, just by doing that, you already add an extra 5,500 square feet. And that is where we start here. We just use the same exact, it's not exactly the envelope, but the same shell. So within the same shell, what can we do with it? Now this is only an option. We don't necessarily, as Mo said, we don't have to stick to that necessary height restriction. We could go one more story. And we worked with Radcliffe on this and worked to develop what these planning themes are. And again, they're listed there right next to each other so that we could kind of start to get a sense of what the spaces look like relative to how they're meeting our needs right now. So that's the campus. Oops. And in doing so, you start with a couple of different concepts. As a designer, you think about flow. How do you get from one space to another? And the first thing we did was we created this circulation corridor, in essence. And it meets, in essence, the entire campus. So if you were to walk through this corridor, you'd see all the spaces that you're using and needing and experiencing. The other concept is, with that circulation corridor, you create a hub, a central hub, that may become the main entrance. And then in that space, you would have a space that's welcoming. It's a reception space. It's a semi-public, semi-private space that allows people to walk through, and our receptionists can see them and greet them, which is something that we just didn't have before. Let's see, move on. Whoops, all right. So we remove the damaged structure, and we go to, boy, this is frustrating. Got it. Okay, then we go to the walls that we talked about. So the separation comes from seismic, of course, but also just general movement, and what you really want is your roof loads to be transferred down to the foundation. So you really need that wall. And we can certainly build it to rematch. We've got the roof in the place, in space. We've got the classrooms down here. Not so great. But we also understand that we don't necessarily need to pitch our roofs to get positive drainage. So what if we go to the next slide and drop the large assembly to the floor, excavate out, drop it down. We could then move the classrooms away from the basement somewhere else, and go to the next. Flatten that roof, and all of a sudden now you have classrooms and youth spaces that are accessible to a roof area, garden. Sun. See, wow, kids like sun, that's great. And then, as you move through the design process, you start thinking about what else can happen. I mean, we go back to indoor, outdoor spaces and the connection between them. And that's a really important part of our design is living in California, we have this opportunity to actually blend those spaces together. So we want to create as many, as Art California designers do, want to create as many opportunities to get outside as possible. We currently have a pretty nice semi-public courtyard that could be made even a little bit more public to be a little bit more inviting. We just introduced the idea of a roof garden space. We've heard a little bit about a cloister roof terrace that may be used for a gleaning garden. If there's some live load issues we can address to make it a little stronger, we could possibly do that. But something else we will get to in just one second is introducing yet another blending space. So by dropping the large assembly down, what we do is we actually create what Mo is saying, that we have these two U-shaped spaces below and above the large assembly. If we drop it down, we don't need to create a use space. We could actually move it out to the edge of the building. That way it gets some natural light. Doesn't need that much natural light. It needs just enough to be able to be a beautiful space, because oftentimes we do shut the drapes, right? We want to control the light. We have a lot of slideshow presentations at the 9 a.m. But that would be something we could easily control. One wall. And you could see that circulation corridor is right there. As if you were moving through the space, you'd be able to see into the large assembly. You can see that there.
Is that the elevator that has the
Yes. So this is they took the design concept pretty far into it. So you have a part of your circulation corridor is vertical circulation. So that's an elevator, stairs, and you'll see all these utilities in the same space. You could actually design that way and think of things and being effective by spacing them in very logical places. So you have your plumbing in one wall, you have your circulation in the same space. That way you're really being efficient about what you're using in there. So the large assembly being pushed out to that side of the wall creates an opportunity to meet the parking lot in some way. One of the things that we were very conscious of as we were just going through this exercise was, can we ramp to the large assembly if it's down below? And it turns out we can. This outdoor space can become a ramp that allows wheelchairs, strollers to just walk right into the large assembly. And it can become a garden right outside of that window that we can see. And next one. And then, of course, we want to be able to get a sense of how these spaces can be sequenced together. The large kitchen that we heard so much that we want to build can be right down below, accessible to the parking lot, so easily accessible to get food in and out, and also serve that large assembly, which is probably the main room that it's going to be serving anyway. Let's go to the next. And again, flexible spaces. We thought about how the spaces can be flexible. We don't want to necessarily assign or attach ourselves to what these spaces are, but that they can be something. And when you put spaces down below, you want to think about what they might be used for. Do they need a lot of daylight? Should they be very well protected from the street? For example, if you're doing recording, the thing you don't want is a lot of bus noise, which we would get. So you shove that down below grade so that the earth actually becomes a natural sound insulator.
Lorenzo.
And then these spaces can be very much similar. Maybe if we decided to have film viewing, that would be a very good space for that.
Lorenzo, the text is pretty hard to read from here. Maybe
Sure.
you could just read the names of the rooms, even though the rooms are not assigned purposes other than the large assembly.
Sure. Large assembly, and this one down here is the music room, warm-up space, and these are undefined. So you'll see circulation is yellow, gathering is red, administration is orange, education blue, support is gray, and then outdoor space is green. We're just in the basement right now. We'll get up to the library in a second. Again, a lot of unspecified spaces. Could we get to the next slide? There we go. So now we're up at level 1. Again, we start with circulation, entry space, a welcoming space. So you'll be able to, as you enter the Pilgrim, you'd be able to see into the large assembly through glass windows and be able to see down below what's going on in there. All right. Oh, and those are the offices. So again, this was a semi-public space so that we could see and welcome people in. Some offices would be in here, small assembly here, right next to the library. Yay. And of course, one of the things we heard from the staff was that they really wanted to be on the same floor. Imagine that, they like being with each other. Next slide will show that we could actually create this a bigger space out of the library and small assembly. And again, we're just playing with spaces and seeing how they could work. When Dan talked about the 24-hour prayer chapel, we imagined that maybe the bride's room can actually become that. So with this hub space, where you could see everything going on, there's actually a level of security built into the idea that it's a 24-hour space. Okay, next slide. And then you go back. I mean, the design process is iterative in the sense that you play with spaces, you go back outside, and you see how those spaces interact with the outside, interact with your circulation. And so, of course, we thought about other things, the cloister terrace, the roof garden, and what does this now private outdoor space above, what does it serve? Next slide. And it serves the classrooms. One of the things we heard a lot of was how wonderful it was at Bethel to be able to see the children just walk right outside from their classrooms. And I think that was something we heard and really we really would like to see happen in the iteration, in the option 2 iteration. Next space. And great. So we could also add other things that can access this roof garden, the private roof garden. Now remember, this would be, since it is primarily children and youth space, this would be a completely locked space. This would be a completely private space so that the public could move through the public and semi-public spaces, but this would be protected. And one of the great ideas we were playing with, and I think this is wonderful, is upstairs, during the week it'd be a staff lounge where there'd be some sofas and a kitchen, but and some co-working space, so you could bring your laptop in there and work. But also on the weekends, it could be a parent space while you're waiting for kids to come out of Yes or Winthrop. You hang out in there. I mean, if I had my way, I'd put a bar in it. Juice bar. But what this also opens up is, even within the same roof structure, you can actually put our apartments right on top of these classrooms. Now, the apartments would take advantage of the fact that there's light in that courtyard as well. And one of the things that Molly really encourages us to do in whatever iteration is to help with housing of staff as they move in. We're not going to be able to get the greatest staff if they can't live here, if they can't afford to live here. So I think that's great. We should have the ability to house people who are coming here. And again, it's just I think we could probably go to the next slide and we can see how Radcliffe has done it in other spaces. For example, this is a podium roof garden with classrooms around it and apartments above it at the architect, Ben Levy, his is a synagogue. So they built this for them, and it works beautifully for them. And the idea is to just think in ways of how we could stack these spaces to get the most use out of them. And that's what starting from, in essence, it's not exactly scratch because we're starting with a shell, but it's just one option. I mean, we could go, if we wanted to go and work with the public, there's nothing wrong with engaging with the public hearing process. I mean, we are a church community. We should be involved in the public hearing process. We should be engaging with the public more often. And we could maybe break this roof line and add another story. I mean, it's an idea. Next, I think the next slide that's it. So that's our summary of benefits. It's a modern space. Of course, new construction, of course it would be green, as Mo said. Cal Green is a great standard. I think we should go beyond it. I think we should make a statement as a congregation that's dedicated to being green. We could go and push net zero. Response to congregations visiting for programming and ministry. Like I said, you want to think about what options we need for the next 100 years. We want to plan for that what the church is going to be like. And then because the spaces are so much usable and just having the modern kitchen, the potential higher tenant income increases, of course. I think that's. Oh, yes, clarifying questions. I think Julie had her hand up.
Since we're staying in the same envelope, does that mean we avoid the whole preservationist issue? With this option?
No, I mean I don't think we're going to be able to. You don't want to this option imagines that we start from scratch in essence. I mean we're using the same envelope or same shell, but we want the design process to dictate what the exterior looks like. We want the design process to inform the aesthetics of it. So that will be met with public hearings.
I see that the small assembly is going to be divided into a office on one end and shrunk that way?
Yes. I mean, in this particular playing with these spaces, again, this is not anything truly specific. We're just talking about central hubs and how flow and spaces are organized. Yes, it is, but it can be combined with the library so that it can be opened up into a larger space.
I still don't see the cellar thrift shop in the expanded.
Yeah. And again, we had a lot of unspecified spaces that we need to understand what our program looks like. The cellar thrift shop can be one of those spaces.
The names of the rooms have been intentionally left as a function rather than a designation so that we can consider what we want to do.
Rachel?
Is the corridor, would it be enclosed or would it be open?
Which corridor? Okay, so, right, circulation is going to be enclosed within Pilgrim, but we want it to visually tie to the cloister so that we have this understanding that you move through the space from within and from without. So that's part of the design intention there, is to really make that corridor, that circulation clear. Wow.
Where would there be space for solar panels?
Solar panels can be, this is the fun part. Solar panel could certainly be utilized the exterior roof, and they wouldn't be so pretty. But we could also think about materials. Again, this is how the design process can inform. Solar panels are extremely important to us. We would really want to consider matching the slate that we have up on the roof right now with maybe some of Solar City's slate tiles. So there are other options, and as a firm, we try to stay agnostic to materials, but we also understand that materials are changing all the time. We are testing out some solar coatings, for example, that we can put on any cladding system that will take up a little bit of solar and start to feed the grid that way. So there's a number of different ways we could do that. And we would definitely want to be seen as doing that. I think it's important that this congregation display our dedication to solar and renewable energy.
Hi, can we get an idea of the possible range of the costs and the time that this will take?
Absolutely, we will. I did not produce that data, where I'm going to invite Mo up in a second to address that.
Yeah, the last bullet you had on the previous slide talked about increased tenant income, and it was clear that there were 3 apartments. But did you also include in that concept the idea that because of this enhanced space and more space, that there would be the opportunity to do more temporary rentals for events and that kind of thing? So both elements are part of your thinking for that?
That's correct. We really anticipated, like, one of the 700 square feet spaces, maybe one of those could become a green room. And that is something that I think a lot of our rental tenants really would like.
Scott will speak to that later in the presentation, but there's a possibility with the classroom configuration that we might be able to use those classrooms for a preschool during the weekdays when they're not otherwise used.
Question, if we go to coffee hour in the large assembly, do we have to go downstairs to get to it?
Or it's a possibility. I think, you know, we could, again, there's a lot of the spaces are undesignated. The small assembly could be our coffee hour, and that's up on the main floor.
Could you show the plan view again?
Sure. I think so.
Well, I want to see the office one.
Okay.
Yeah. My question is, I'm trying to envision, you've actually split the staff into two spaces, and since my wife is one of the staff, I'm really curious who's going to be in which space? Are you envisioning that the welcoming space is also her space?
We imagine the receptionist to be in the welcoming space. Her office would be one of these.
Okay, so there's more than one office in that space. Okay.
We actually envisioned Nate, Molly, and Louise's office in this space.
In that area, okay.
Hi, I'm John Coates. Could you talk a little bit more about the light into the large assembly? The first slide that you put up, when it was pointing at the classrooms that are already down there, was sort of saying dark, yet you're putting the large assembly in the same floor space and not against, what is that, Dana down there? So the only natural light's coming in from the parking lot.
That's correct. That would be the primary natural light. What we also envisioned was actually, since we have a separate wall, we might bring in light from this wall as well.
So there's two ideas that come with this concept. One is that the space between the wall between the large assembly and the outdoor space, that could be entirely glass and light the room. Or you could have a glass wall between the sanctuary and the large assembly, exposing the brick with some natural light flowing down. The options are really unlimited. It's up to our imagination to choose a path to go forward. This is but one iteration at 5,500 square feet over option one. We can go with 2,000. We can go with 10,000.
Is the rooftop garden a play space? And if so, would the East Bay School for Boys have access to that?
I think as we envisioned the rooftop garden, we envisioned it to be really private space. And the idea is to create a secure outdoor space. We talked a little bit about maybe having it be an outdoor chapel, maybe being a play space, maybe being a place for a labyrinth. There's a lot of things that could happen out there. But I think the primary thing is it serves as an outdoor space for those rooms that are around it and above it.
We are about to cycle around to people asking questions that had a chance during the first session. So before I hand the mic to somebody who's already asked a question, is there a hand that wants to ask a new one? Rick?
Hi. Oh.
My wife.
Or your wife.
I had the mic. My question is there a way to compare this to option one? What would be helpful to me is to see a breakdown of the different designations of square footage. Like, are we getting more office space or more large assembly or more kitchen? It's sort of the comparison of square footage for each of those categories would be great. If it's not available now, maybe later.
Certainly, we could do that. I didn't want to get too far into the square footages. We played with the square footages so that we have an understanding that it can work in that space. But we didn't go so far as to try to really kind of delineate what's going to be in there. I know Paul had a question that Rick.
Mine is sort of a combination of something Mo mentioned
the percentage of our total lot size we can use? Does either of these two plans force us to then go to a smaller footprint? I mean, maybe that's not what he meant, but it seemed like there was an idea that if we remove the building, that we then have to conform to a smaller percentage of the total lot size. Did I understand that correctly, or no?
Mo, could you help out with this question?
I think he's restating Mo's comments correctly in that if you remove the entire building, you do face additional restrictions. So this concept, which was done by Ratcliffe, we didn't ask them to make this concept. What we gave to them were 3 summary documents and then a series of meetings with them. And they very cleverly came up with this concept within the same footprint, on the same foundation, with the same wall constraints. They would recommend that we dig 2 feet deeper and start with a new foundation, because that would remove the height limitation in the ground floor from 8 feet to 10 feet, providing better acoustics for the rehearsal room and a much nicer feel in some large rooms on the lower level. So again, this is just a concept. It's premised on the existing foundation and walls.
Yeah, I think Paul's been waiting for...
Yep. And Louise has another question as well.
Lorenzo, Paul Chapman here, fellow FRC member. I just want to thank you and thank Mo for these really very clear and inspiring explanations of what we might do. I've been part of this conversation for the last 9 months, and the observation I would like to make comes in part from my dialogue with fellow FRC member Roger Bash. I think there's another model here that we ought to be considering. I would call it 1.5. If this is 2 and we've seen 1, which is, Mo, you described as basically a like-for-like replacement, I think there's a remodel concept that would be a potential intermediate one that might be appealing for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which would include faster time frame and lower cost. And I just conclude on that remark by saying Roger has prepared some plans. They've been seen by at least Blue Sky. I brought them with me and would be glad to share them because I think they will expand our thinking if we take a look at them. Thanks.
Thank you.
To further Paul's comment, Roger was kind enough to share with us his vision of Pilgrim Hall. He had been working on plans for years in case we came across some money and an opportunity to improve it. And when the fire happened, he took that one step further and poured a lot of thought into it and prepared really a great set. And Roger presented to our Blue Sky team for about 30 minutes one night, walking through it floor by floor. And he's really built in some very clever solutions. We chose not to use Roger's plan for this concept. We chose to use something else with a little bit more imagination in terms of changing the flow of the building. Roger's plans, while they're great, they solve a lot of problems, they make a lot of improvements beyond the minimum code, they didn't actually change the flow of the building. And what we got through the themes was that the flow, the visibility, access, flexibility were really, really important. And so we gave these summary documents from your input to Ratcliffe. And this is what we came back. And we thought it was more appropriate to share this vision than we did with Roger's. But his plans are available, and we can certainly make those at your disposal for review.
And I would add that Roger's plan is closer to the previous version than this one.
Louise, do you still have a question?
I have a question. Actually, I just want to be on record that, Paul, you beat me by one microphone, and that I do believe that a look at Roger's plans would be really helpful to those of you who want to see concrete things that don't cost a lot more.
Sure, 1 second for a mic, please.
will you have an opportunity during this presentation to talk about what it would look like if we built up to 10,000 versus 5,000?
No, we did not prepare a set of graphics for that size increase.
Initially, the Blue Sky team had a multitude of options. Off of each of these, so we had option 1A and 1B, option 2, A, B, and C, and 3, D, E, and F, and it became quite clear that it was just too much, it was too confusing. But if we were to add affordable housing units beyond staff in Pilgrim Hall, you could easily get up to 45,000 square feet here if you wanted to put on floors 4 and 5 and have 20 units. So again, this is but a concept. Somewhere between 21,000 square feet and 50,000 square feet is a choice that we can make collectively.
But just as a brief imagining of what an extra 5,000 square feet would look like, you can actually imagine just going up one more floor, having 3 floors exposed to that garden.
And that exercise was very intentional to stay within the existing foundation, existing walls, and existing limitations. Phil.
I've heard a number of little pieces about both the things that might need to happen. Well, okay, so you used the term shell and you used another one, envelope.
Envelope.
I'm not sure what either of those mean as you talk about them. Let me just kind of add the pieces and then you can say. So I've heard also a little piece that even with the most basic plan, some of the outside structure may need to come out just to do the work that's required for the wall and the elevator, whatever. And I think I've also heard that there hasn't even been a determination yet about whether we can even use any of the existing structure, that there's a chance that the city or whoever is in charge will say, no, you have to take it all down. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the difference between shell and envelope is envelope's actually a very technical term that is the basic protection of the interior building from the exterior building. The shell in itself is just this outline. And Ratcliffe really wanted to stay within that shell just as a practice, as a way of just giving it some constraints. Oh, you're right. The follow-up question to that was that, are we talking about the actual existing walls? My analysis of the building paper as a waterproofing expert is that it shouldn't be used. We would need to take the brick down, and if we want to put the brick back up, we could do that. We could certainly do that. But it would be below the standard of care to use the existing built craft paper. So we would really need to take the paper down, put up some new waterproofing around the structure. Other things can cause the structure to need to come down. Too much water exposure, termites, a number of different things. Okay. Thank you, guys.
I think Mo is up.
Just briefly. Let's see. All right, so I think we're going to try to do some comparisons about time and money here. So there have been no real construction cost estimates done on this. We've kind of used broad square foot numbers and tried to get the relationships right. After listening to Lorenzo, maybe the prices will go up a little bit, but there are additional loads on top of these costs, which would be about the same either way. One way or the other, you're going to have to pay for design, and you're going to have to pay for administration of it, and so on and so forth. So, and also, in the little table, we'll get a certain amount of money from the insurance company settlement, and that will be applied to whatever we do. So we're not trying to, see how much we're going to get and what the remainder is. We're just trying to compare the cost of one type of idea to another. So the next slide. So the option one, the size is what it is around 21,400 square feet. We're not adding any space to it in option one. The other one would be around 5,000 square feet larger. The cost of it, the round order of magnitude there is around 6 million, and the other one would be, 8 million. And as we said, that's sort of like an intensive remodel, of the space where we would kind of stay the same foundation. We wouldn't tear the whole thing down, but we would have to change, some windows and other types of things. And certainly the core structure where we're adding more, like the outdoor play area and that kind of stuff would have to be completely redone. And it would, because of the additional time that it would take to go through planning, because once we change windows, roof lines, materials, all that kind of stuff, then we're going to get into open public hearings, and that can add a wild card to it. So it adds a considerable amount of potential time. If it all goes smoothly, it doesn't add that much, but nothing really goes too smoothly in Berkeley usually when you start these kind of things. So that's why it would be, a lot more time to do anything that changes the exterior. So there you have sort of a broad comparison of the two.
I'll pass the mic, but just keep a note that we're probably about 20 minutes behind at this point.
So your 32 to 48 months and your 26 to 36 months does not include about a year's worth of trying to get permits and getting the stuff drawn up? Or that is just construction time?
So in the first one, option one, it's around a year's worth of permits and around 18 months worth of work, right? So there could be some more time. In the other one, it's probably the build time is a little longer because we're adding more space and so on. I would think that the planning time would be longer too. It could be a couple of years or more. So then what are those times mean? That's the total amount of time. Including permitting and construction. It's not just construction. It will be permitting and construction.
Are we all set to move on to the next option, or any last questions? Oh, who has the question sheet and where is it passing around?
So Amy.
Phil has one more question here. Oh. I don't think Vicky or Greg have had a chance for a question.
Thank you. Mo? Yeah? I don't know if you can quantify this, but my question about those comparisons is there any way to assess the difference in risk between the first project and the second? Risk of increased costs, things getting out of control, risk of further delay. Is there a substantial difference between the two?
Well, yeah, obviously once you get into the public realm, there's, more risk that it would, take longer than we anticipated. And, there is only a certain amount of money that the insurance company will pay for the, the period when we're not back in our building. And it would, in either case, we're going to run out of that money. But it's just a matter of how long, we would be kind of in this holding period and be uncompensated for, the rental that we used to get from that space and so on.
Will you take another question from Christina?
Just could you clarify, are the bricks actually usable to put back up? Because I'm hearing two different things, like if we change the exterior, as if keeping the exterior is an option. Is it even an option?
Yes, it is. It's an expensive option because you would have to take the brick down, clean all the mortar off, stack it all up, and then put it back on using mortar and proper ties. So yes, it could be done, and it would be it would look the way it looks now. The problem is that clinker brick, which is slightly burned, a lot of it is really hard to get, So, we would lose some of it, and if we change the configuration of things, we would have to get more. So filling it in, it's a challenge.
I would encourage us to write down additional questions and move on to
That's a
option
long way
3.
away, the brick. Yeah. I believe the insurance would cover that because we had brick now and we want brick then, and they would cover it. I'm not an expert on insurance, but
I would, yes, the insurance will pay to repair the building as to what you had before, but also to code. So if we chose, the brick needs to come down or the walls can't be waterproofed, right, down to the ground. But when you put it back, you waterproof them and you attach the brick in a more seismically strategic way. It's a choice we can make. What goes back? We can use brick or not brick, but to salvage the old brick would be an undue burden that the insurance company wouldn't pay for. They would pay for new brick, but for labor to clean each one of those bricks to reuse them in their old, deteriorated condition is unwise.
So I'm going to invite everybody to stand up and just stretch and move around a little because we've been sitting a long time. And I want to appreciate everyone's patience in listening and the amount of brain power that we're all using to listen to all this information. Okay? Okay, great. So now the third option. Thank you. Next slide.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy, or is it really? Where's the clock? There used to be a clock back there. Good afternoon. I'm Amy Heestand. You know me from last year. I was the moderator, and I am no longer the moderator, and I've had a nice hiatus from church duties for a few months, but I'm back, and I am actually really pleased to be able to be talking to you today as one of the experts. I don't like being called that. I think there's so many, along with Scott Sporty, and I will be presenting this option together, and I bring some experience working in affordable housing. I don't know if you knew I worked in that industry or field. I have been working in it a long time. I will let you know that, well, right now I'm a consultant. I work with a lot of cities, and I work with counties, looking at affordable housing policy and program design, and I've looked at a lot of potential projects. I've seen a lot of housing get built over the years, affordable housing, and so I know it can get done. And it is a long process, but the Bay Area has a very robust field of people who, and organizations and developers and community development finance institutions. A lot of people work in this field, and it's really one of the best parts of the country for it and what gets produced here. So I come with that perspective, and I would say my background is more, before I did this work, I worked actually as a city government person. I worked in housing as a staffer, as a housing person, so more from, and I worked for the city of Emeryville for a lot of years, so a lot of development happened in that city, and we were evaluating projects and deciding where to plug in our redevelopment money at the time. So that's what and to this day, I'm looking at developments and kind of evaluating them for feasibility, and I see it happen. And I would say in my day-to-day life, I see good news and bad news come across my email. Good news in that I'll see emails from a housing trust of Silicon Valley announcing putting in funds to a project in Palo Alto or Mountain View, where you might not see a lot of affordable housing. So there were like positive things happening every day, and then I'll share with you some data from a report that came out this week from the National Low Income Housing Coalition that just looked at like across the country how expensive it is to and how unaffordable housing is throughout our country. So it's like good news, bad news, good news, and so see that every day. So
Scott and I will be talking about this third option with you today, and looking at some of the planning and development considerations, why we're even looking at this, and a possible path forward. So I will start by just mentioning again that we looked at the Pilgrim Hall site itself for affordable housing and kind of quickly concluded that, for one, it didn't seem to be very desirable through the kind of listening sessions that we were hearing about from the Blue Skies process. This is kind of affordable housing beyond kind of what was shown in your option 2, where some, it's a few apartments that are kind of church controlled. It is the kind of shared use of our church needs and our programmatic needs, plus an affordable housing kind of use above that did not appear to be feasible. It was complicated. The number of units that we could get on that site, maybe like 30 units or so, would not be attractive, honestly, for a developer, for a variety of reasons. There are some developers who do that, smaller scale development, but not, they're really, the financing and kind of what is feasible in this market, and from a property management perspective, they will be managing the property. It just didn't work. So we don't even have anything to show you for that. What we're talking about, let's go on to the next slide, is the north side of the campus, the Durant facing side of our campus. And can you switch to the next slide actually real quick? I just want to orient. Yeah, we're just talking about this area. Okay, so we had looked down here, didn't want to spend time on that. So we're looking up here. I sort of shaded this lot here, but what it's not showing is that we're not looking at a rendering today of what the affordable housing could look like. It's not even showing setbacks. This is just kind of filling in the lot. There will be required setbacks, and that gets down into the I'm sorry, setbacks are the requirements that when you develop the lot, you need to set back from the actual lot line so that you're not, covering your whole lot all the way to the edge. So 10 feet, I don't know if this is, if it's a 10-foot setback, it's here. And it kind of, so you're not covering your whole lot. So that's a setback. So let's just go back to the prior slide. So when we're talking about this third option, we're talking about a nonprofit affordable housing development. It would be owned and managed and built by that developer. Just thinking kind of broad brush about what could happen on this site, we might look at 1 to 2 floors of kind of subterranean parking and a podium structure with affordable housing residential floors above that. It would be rental, as far 100% affordable, meaning they're paying affordable rents versus the skyrocketing rents that we're seeing that are unpredictable and keep going up in this area. As far as what it is, and we'll talk later about kind of a path forward, I think our church, if we do this, would have a lot to say about what we'd be looking for as far as who is living in this development. So unfortunately, there's need in all these groups. Families need housing. Senior citizens need housing. It's a growing population of seniors, and special needs units would refer to units that are for frail elderly, or it could be people with different types of disabilities. A lot of developments now that the affordable housing developers are doing in the Bay Area they're not going to do 100% of necessarily a development that is, all for homeless people. They might do something like 40, affordable family rental units, and then you might have 10 units that are kind of carved out that are for a special needs group, or they're called permanent supportive housing units, and they're kind of financed differently, and therefore you could serve formerly homeless vets, or you could serve transition-aged youth, coming out of foster care. So a lot of the developments are done that way, where there's kind of a set-aside portion. All of the developments now that I have seen have residential support services that the developer is coordinating and putting on site. A lot of them even have like whole divisions within their firms that are developing the resident support services. Even, just kind of a typical family affordable project will have resident services like classes, on life skills, or community building events. Then they also will have, if they have these kind of special needs units, they'll bring in agencies who specialize in that population that will come on site like twice a week and do, so they'll always, kind of have office space built for the resident support services. Okay, so let's move on. A little bit more about why we're looking as a church at affordable housing. It was one of the top 3 issues. I remember the flyer that went out maybe a month and a half ago that the Blue Sky team put out with some of the data from their surveys. It was one of the top issues identified through the visioning surveys, along with food security, homelessness. Last year, when I was moderator, the Outreach and Ministry Mission, they did a survey of a congregational process on identifying their priorities for their grant-making processes. And food security and affordable housing came out through that process back in 2016. Last year, in mid-October, right before the November election, our church voted to endorse Measure A, which is A1, which was the bond measure that passed with like 72%, 73% of the vote in Alameda County. And so there are finally, there's sort of a permanent source of, not permanent, but funding in Alameda County. I meant to say local funding in Alameda County, $580 million. And in a very large portion of that is for rental development. So 16, and some of it comes back to cities. City of Berkeley will have $16 million from that bond, plus the City of Berkeley is part of a regional pool that includes some of the North County cities, and there's $90 million in that pool from that bond. So yay for our church for endorsing that, and that got passed. And that was one of a few bond measures that were passed in the whole Bay Area, up to $1 billion of funding. So, this is the good news. There's finally some funding at a local level that, since on the federal level, it's been cut back really significantly over the last 10 years. Okay, next slide. So, most people in affordable housing are employed. I don't know if that's something that people didn't know, but we have the people in affordable housing are working, and they are. I wanted to show actually the next slide. There's what we look at on an affordability measure is are people spending more than 30% of their incomes on housing? Because if they are, they're so-called cost burdened. And in Berkeley, like 54% of renters here in Berkeley are cost burdened. It means they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So Alameda County median income for a one-person household is $65,500. 4-person family, the median is $93,600. This is just showing you for a few occupations, their kind of average annual wage and what their wage is as a percent of the area median income, and the percent of income they would need to afford a fair market rent apartment, which is $1,723, and actually that is, the fair market rents are lower than what is really going on out there. I mean, so this is just one measure that we look at. But for the mechanic, making about $24,000 a year, 87% of their income is needed to afford that apartment. It's untenable. Preschool teacher, these are all cost burden situations. The preschool teacher, 55% of their income being spent to afford that apartment. And a firefighter, about 40%. So this report I was just mentioning, I just saw it yesterday. There's you can look this up. Out of Reach 2017, it's by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. Maybe when we send out our materials, we can send a link to this. It looks at the hourly wage required to afford, in their case, like a 2-bedroom fair market. And it looks at it, you can sort of plug in your zip code and kind of look it up. I have I'll just leave this at lunchtime in the back, but another measure of this. So in Alameda County, for like a $2,100 a month apartment, the hourly wage necessary to afford that and have it be affordable is $41 an hour. So the annual income needed for that is $86,000. The full-time job equivalent needed to afford that is four FTEs. So when you hear about people who are like living, doubling up, tripling up, or have multiple minimum wage jobs, it's because they can't afford what's going on in our community with the apartments. So there is the other end of the spectrum. On growing homelessness, we know this is the case, we see this, and we experience it, and our campus here is right, just in the heart of Berkeley. We know that there is a growing homelessness issue in our community. There was just, a PIT is called a point-in-time homeless count. One was just done in January, and in Alameda County, at the point in time, there were 5,629 people who were homeless, 69% of whom were unsheltered. And in Berkeley, 308 people are sheltered and 664 are unsheltered. Just a few data points. There is a flyer that I brought today, and I left it somewhere. And if you see a stack of about 50 of these, please let me know. I'm not sure where they are, but I'll put them out in the back when I find it. But there's a nice infographic on this point in time count, but just a few of the data points. 507 are children under 18, 1,000 are youth, age 18 to 24, 1,600 are chronically homeless, meaning they've been homeless for more than a year. 85% of the chronically homeless are unsheltered. I am actually ready to turn it over to Scott. But thank you. I mean, I think the point in showing all this data is I think we as a community know this. I wanted to share some data with you, but also just be able to, there is a range of need, and I think if we go forward with this, we know it's there, and so, okay.
Thanks, Amy. I'm Scott Sporty, and I am standing between you and lunch right now. And so I'll tell you just briefly about myself. For the last 25 years, I've worked for a community development financial institution. Our job is to work with nonprofit organizations that have a vision, to think about the ways that they can provide more service to the populations that they want to serve. We provide lending financing. We help them think about where to get grants, what kind of federal tax credits they can bring into a project. So we recognize that anything that needs to get done in communities like this requires a lot of different layers of financing. And we're probably going to need to think about that in the kinds of projects we want to do here. So first of all, haven't we talked about housing before? And yeah, in recent memory, in the last decade, we've gone through this probably about, well, actually a little longer than that. Three particular examples. So some of you remember back in the late 1970s, a group actually formed of church members called the Berkeley Pilgrimage Foundation, and through some interesting effort during a time when interest rates were like 19%, they managed to obtain a loan from HUD and constructed a 58-unit independent senior housing project on the corner of Delaware and Shattuck. Very successful project. It still exists today. About 6 years ago, that project was sold to what is currently called SAHA, then called Satellite Housing Associates, and it's being operated by them. And that money was provided, or the sale proceeds came to Berkeley Pilgrimage Foundation, and BPF is using that to make grants around the Berkeley area right now. And then mostly Laszlo Banier and Henry Snyder spent some time trying to think of ways that we could bring senior housing to areas around this campus. In 2006, they talked with the Methodist Church across the street and with the Berkeley City Club about some multi-use way to combine our campuses, do little bridges across Durant to be able to bring this all together. Ultimately, the Methodists and really the City Club decided this wasn't something they wanted to do. So that kind of fell apart. So we came back at it again a few years later, thinking about a way that we could try to build a continuing care retirement community, a CCRC, on this campus right here. And they went so far as to do some massing studies to show what could happen using this parking lot, the Durant House area, excuse me, and that plan included purchasing the apartment building next door. This was, if you recall, what was like in 2010. It was hard to get any financing done. Things were, it was sort of the depth of that recession era, and they realized, or the people who put together that initial feasibility study saw that it just was infeasible. It would require too much equity. They had a high mix of market rate versus affordable units, and to do the kind of high-end finishes that a market rate project would expect, it would be way too expensive per unit. So it kind of fell apart at that point. So now we're coming back at you again with some different thoughts about how affordable housing can work. What comes next? We'll skip this. We've talked a lot about the zoning. Happy to talk about that a little bit more. But here's what's happening around us right now. There is market rate development all over the place. And at the moment, it's all market rate. So where are we standing? Right there is the Methodist Church, which for years, decades has been, since the earthquake of '89, has not been used. They've decided to sell it to some out-of-country developers who are turning it into a very large, high-density, multi-story, market rate development right there. That building to the other side of the City Club is called student housing, this one here on this corner. It's actually, yeah, it's housing for students, but it's pretty expensive too. Unless you're a graduate student with another source of income, it's not affordable. There's no set aside for affordability. So here we're sitting with a huge need for affordable housing. We've got a dormitory going up in this parking lot right here. So this whole area is going to be tall buildings, high density, largely market rate construction except for the Cal dorms. And no affordability. Rents are rising, and there's a real significant need for affordable housing development. And we have a surface parking lot that we're using, sure, we're using it, but there are probably higher and better uses for this chunk of property that we have. I think it's really important for us to think about ways that we can leverage that property to provide affordability for this part of Berkeley. So some of the things to think about as we're considering the possibility, actually for all the projects we're thinking about, but especially for affordable housing development. To do affordable housing, this would be something of a phased project. We would speak with nonprofit developers. We would actually look for an RFP, offer some input into what we'd like to see over in that corner of the property. But then they're going to have to go through a process of assembling the financing, getting the entitlements, thinking about the planning. It's going to take them longer just to undertake that. Even if we started construction on this in a couple of years, they would still be a little bit behind us. So we'd still have construction going on, but under separate projects, separate financing. We have the opportunity to offer some input and preferences into how we'd like the housing to be developed. We can say we'd like this to be primarily for seniors, like it to be primarily for the formerly homeless, any number of different opportunities, and then we're letting the developers come back to us and say how they would like to see use of that property, and we can choose which one we like the best. The other thing is that it's their responsibility to do all this. It's not our construction project. It's not our financing. There are people who do this well, and we're not them. So let's let them do that. So I think I've spoken to all this too. The final thing I'll say though is this bottom bullet, which is those are 3 residential lots up there. We have the opportunity to sell them to generate somewhere between $2 and $3 million that we could put toward the Pilgrim Hall redevelopment project, or into a long-term ground lease that will provide us with years of an income source, somewhere in the low 6 figures, but that would provide us with rental income that we could use to support some sort of debt or even our own operations over time. We'll skip this one too, and this one too. I'm just mindful of time at the moment. We can come back to them, I'm sure, and we'll make these available. Okay, so I'm also talking about the income side. And what I'm going to say is, I think everyone immediately jumps to, oh, we're going to have a capital campaign. And chances are good that a capital campaign will enter into a piece of this. But there are other ways for us to think about how to bring capital into a project without having to raise money from ourselves. So that's partly what this is. So I've thought about the potential for us to generate additional income from the space that we would be developing over on Pilgrim Hall. So for the option 1, which really is essentially the same amount of square footage, but fresher, more useful, I think it'll be more attractive to outside parties wanting to come in and make use of the building. I thought that it could probably generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000, maybe a little bit more in annual rental income, using some kind of market rate assumptions about what debt would look like that services a $400,000 or a $500,000 loan. So we could borrow it, but that rental income would pay for that source. That's the exact model of what we did with Plymouth House, where we ourselves financed the renovations to Plymouth, and then the East Bay School for Boys is paying us rent payments that allows us to pay that debt. For the second option, which provides about 5,500 additional square footage, and of course we've gone back and forth about the different spectrum sizes, but there are a range of uses. We could have nonprofit organizations making some permanent use of that space for their offices or their programs. The East Bay School is likely going to want or need to expand. They could make use of our classroom space and rent that as well. So there are a number of different ways we can use our expanded facility to generate income for uses that we would find appropriate, and during the week when we're not here very much, we're making better use of the space profitably. So that additional 5,500 square feet and this is a below market, so if I took market rents, this would be a whole different number. This is about half of the current market rate, generates enough to support about a $1.75 million, maybe even a $2 million loan, depending on interest rates and terms. Okay. And then the third option, the fee simple sale, which means we sell those lots up there and forget about them, could generate $2.5 to $3 million. If we entered into a long-term ground lease, $125,000 more or less, thinking about how many units they're developing or what the square footage of those lots could be, and that's another up to $2 million in financing that could be supported with that ground lease. So as we think about the gaps that come from the cost to reconstruct the building behind us and what the insurance could generate for us, those are just some of the ways that we could bring in creative financing to help us do that without our having to do as much of a capital campaign as we're fearing that we might need to. I think that's it. Okay. And this is the same box that we saw at the very beginning, sort of re-summarizing options 1, 2, and the affordable housing. Yeah. For option 1, Pilgrim Hall reconstructed is providing us with the code upgrades, the accessibility improvements. It has the benefit of the lowest cost and the shortest amount of time. Option 2 gets us all those code upgrades, probably a seismically stronger, perhaps a different flow to the building overall. It considers the future by adding a little bit more space for programming or other future needs, and through that can generate some additional rental income. And then the third option assumes that either 1 or 2 or something in between for Pilgrim Hall is occurring, and we're able to provide the affordable housing need that Berkeley has. At the same time, it provides us with some revenue for us to do what we want to do in Pilgrim.
There's a disconnect there. This says option 2 plus, and what you just said was 1 or 2.
That is correct. We didn't correct this one. The first version is correct. So anything, either 1 or 2 can happen, and then 3 is a plus.
I think we're ready for a Q&A, so I'll go to the next slide and pass the mic.
Okay. I'm going to hand Joanne my microphone.
So if you're in favor of 3, then you also vote for 1 or 2?
So this is why you're going to get 3 whole dots, right? And you can use your 3 dots any way you want. Right. So the idea is and it's really important to understand that 3 is not an exclusion. So 3, how do I say this? That 3 is not if you're interested or feel that God is calling this church to create affordable housing, which is option 3, you still have to decide between what you're going to do with Pilgrim Hall. Right, so this is so what's going to happen now is if we're going to go to lunch. You're going to go get burritos. You're going to sit in groups with people, hopefully that you don't know, with one person from the Blue Sky team, and everyone is going to get 3 dots. The colors don't mean anything; it'll just look pretty. And outside, I've put up 3 poster paper, one that says option 1, one that says option 2, and one that says option 3. And everyone's going to get 3 dots, and you can use no selling or trading of dots. But you're going to be able to. So if you think that one option is really is that what you feel you're being called to, and what the church is being called to, you could put all 3 of your dots on option 2 or 1 or 3. So this is just a way of gauging the temperature of where you are right now. Right? This is very important. Beg pardon? Yes, I am, but I'm explaining what we're going to do after we take questions. Okay. All right. So let's take questions for about 5 minutes.
Question over here. Okay. Yeah, I have a quick question. So, from your presentation for option 3 or this affordable housing, I actually haven't heard any negatives. Are there any? I would imagine there might be.
Yes. So one of them is that we would be trying to build a 4 or 5-story building in a place that hasn't had one. So it will change the look of this campus. There will be construction going on for a period of time that we would need to contend with. We also need to think about what happens to the parking spaces that we currently have on those 3 lots, whether we are needing to release them from that project, or whether we need to lease them from that project and pay for them, or if that means we're going to give up some parking spaces. Oh yes, right, I keep forgetting about that part too. And then the staff currently use that building, use Durant House for its offices. So there is a period of time, right, thank you. Durant House over there. So Amy wants to.
Yeah. No, I think the concept of this phasing and sequencing is really important to remember in this, is that the trajectory for either 1 or 2, the Pilgrim Hall rebuilds, is that those either one of those would very likely be completed before folks would need to move out of Durant House. I mean, so because affordable housing, I say, it's a challenge. I mean, these developments do take longer. that can be a good thing in this case, because in the time that that is in its pre-development stages, there's the Pilgrim Hall is built, and so there was a space in that in option 2 for an apartment. I mean, his family could be moving into that one, and then the staff offices could be over in Pilgrim Hall before you even broke ground on the option 3.
It seems like in order to make an intelligent decision at this point, I need at least a best guesstimate on how much insurance might cover. Like just a real guesstimate range, is it going to cover 4,000 to 6,000 maybe, or 6,000 to 8,000 maybe, some.
I mean, I hope million. We're looking at a number somewhere 6-ish to plus $1 million, depending on how we're able to negotiate that.
Scott,
I am saying that we might be $1 million short at the moment. For even option 1, it could be more or less than that, depending on how well we're able to negotiate the next steps with the insurance company.
that range, Mo and Milton gave a rather thorough discussion about it, and it could be $2 million. It's to be determined. We'll probably find out at the end of the summer after the Fire Recovery Committee has put together their claim. It's been analyzed, it's been discussed back and forth, and they've come to an agreement, hopefully before we bring this final issue to a vote in September. But there are a lot of unknowns. Mike has the next question here.
Yeah, I just want to ask, is there synergies between the options 1, 2, and then 3? Is 3 almost a separate decision to be made, or is there a reason why it's grouped together with the other 2?
So the reason that 3 is here is because it provides a cross-financing opportunity for what we want to do here. We're talking right now about there being a gap between the insurance settlement amount and whatever it is that we want to do. And that gap could be smaller, it could be larger. To be able to utilize that property to generate income to help us support that property is the primary reason to put them together.
Is there some sense of the impact from the reduced parking on our revenue from rentals? Because obviously our rentals would be less valuable if people can't park to come to events that are put on here.
Bill, can I just add something to Mike's question? Because my slide didn't get up there, but that's okay, I'm a forgiving person. I wanted to talk about the Kairos moment opportunity that was here. The reason we're linking these ideas is because originally we had this idea, maybe we could expand Pilgrim Hall and include affordable housing. That proved largely untenable. But I think God sort of got us moving on that imagining. And there are so many pieces. Kairos means God's timing. And one of my favorite scriptures is all things work together for good for those who love God. And it feels strongly to me, and I think some of you, there are a lot of different forces working together, from the A1 bond. Oh, yay! Okay, I jumped the gun on that. To a new mayor and a new city council who are extremely supportive of affordable housing. To our stated core values as OMS and a wider community, to the worst affordable housing crisis the Bay Area has ever seen. We can see the suffering on a daily basis. We walk by it every day, and there's a ton of suffering we cannot see among people just like us, right? So this is the Kairos moment, and that's why we're having this as one conversation.
Next question for Steve over here.
So parking revenue generates sorry. Impact, yeah.
If there's less parking available
That
for
is-
people renting this space for events, then it makes this space less valuable.
That's where I'm starting. So just to give you the overall contribution of the parking revenue is a low 5-figure number. Well, I'm pointing out right now is relatively small in what we're able to offer. The fact is that there are 2 large parking structures on either side of the building, and so this is a single level parking lot, which at most holds 40-something cars, and cutting it back to 20 is not a significant difference.
Next question to Steve.
Okay.
I just had a question about the voting process. I kind of understand by putting a dot on option 1, you're voting against option 2. And I could sort of see that if there's a bunch of dots on more dots on option 2 than option 1, that kind of gets a sense of who wants what. I don't understand, as positive as I am about option 3, I don't understand how one would vote against option 3. So I'm not sure what are we gonna look afterwards and there's going to be some dots on option 3, so what does that mean?
So I want to be very clear.
Okay.
I mean, we could say voting. It's really about and I'm going to be really granular about language because I think it's very helpful. That you're indicating your preference. You're indicating what you're feeling God is calling this church to focus its energy and effort. So the goal and objective of using the dots is to identify your preference. So the way to think about it is that this is another level of information that the Blue Sky team and you as a congregation will have. This is not binding. This is just like, given everything that you've heard today, and even if you've been on various committees, what in your heart, in your mind and in your body and in your spirit, what are you feeling God is calling you as a congregation to create? What options do you want to pursue further? So I keep on, so when you say vote, it's not real, you're not voting, you're just, because voting implies a decision. And all we're doing is saying what your preference is or what you're being called for. Do you understand? And I want to, Richard, and then
I am still confused on the dot thing, but my other question was, in the slide it said that if we sell the lots, it's 2.5 to 3 million. That sounds awfully low for Berkeley property, but maybe it's just a market thing. Okay. But it seems to me if you have 3 dots, we have 2 options that aren't really related in a major way. I mean, option 3 is one thing, and what we do with Pilgrim Hall is another thing. Mm-hmm. And the only link is maybe funding, but to me it's confusing having 3 dots and 2 options.
Okay, all right, I'm going to think about this, and we might, okay, I see your point.
Let me pass the mic to Janet for a question.
Wait, is he going to? No. He had a question. It's a rough number based on $100 per square foot for the lot. And it's $150 per square foot for the lot. I don't want to overestimate. Could possibly do better, but then there's some other givebacks.
Some of you may know that I'm quite interested in seeing if there's a way that East Bay Sanctuary Covenant can be involved in our process here. In options 1 and 2, and/or if we didn't do option 3, how would East Bay Sanctuary Covenant's needs be able to be met in our campus?
That's a very good question. There's probably inadequate space unless we add additional square feet in terms of a permanent basis.
But shared space?
We can choose to configure the building however we wish, but there wasn't a whole lot of extra space in the existing Pilgrim Hall. It met our needs, but if we want to invite others in, I'm not sure where you would house a tenant.
Well, so option 2, we had the 1,400 square feet on the ground floor next to a large assembly. And I heard a few people bring up and celebrate with joy the idea of a rebuilt thrift shop. And I have no desire to pit 2 groups against each other, but either the thrift shop or East Bay Sanctuary Covenant could utilize that 1,400 square feet. And I've talked to Sister Maureen, and it's possible that they could have 1,400 dedicated square feet and then use the large assembly during the week to meet with clients. That we're too far out to know one or both or neither. And the thing about the thrift shop is Bob Hellison's been working with a small group on determining future viability. Even before the fire, The volunteer staff of the thrift shop was tired. They were getting older. There was some sense that maybe this project was winding down. You know, we place a high value on the thrift shop. And certainly there's plenty to indicate in our wider culture that our neighborhood supports thrift shops. It's not a bad idea, but can our internal church culture support it? Let's not task another generation who haven't been kind of brought into that, a lot of whom are working 2 jobs or going to school and working or raising kids and working and going to school. It's just a really different environment. We don't know enough yet.
So I'll just take 30 seconds to provide some context on how we use the space. What came through in our values was flexibility and a number of other things. One of those was, let's use the space efficiently. Let's not dedicate too much space to a thrift shop that is only open perhaps 20 hours a week. And Bob is doing a great job leading an effort with a number of people to determine if the thrift shop is viable. So in the survey, a couple things came out, and in the listening sessions. Everybody likes the winter shelter program. Nobody volunteered to help staff it, run it, clean up after it. Everybody likes the kitchen and food, and almost everybody wants to be involved in preparing food for others. It's a big contrast there. The thrift shop is beloved across the pews, but I'm unaware of people that actually are committing to say, I want to work in that thrift shop. I'll volunteer so the thrift shop can be open 5 days a week, 35 hours a week instead of 20. So there's a range of opportunities, there's a range of desires. Again, there's no right or wrong dream. We'll solve this puzzle together with everyone's input. But just keep that in context of what are you willing to do to join up? Because we can't pay somebody to run the thrift shop. That's not financially viable. Lorenzo, did you want to have a question? So why don't I try and catch the people that haven't had a chance to ask questions before we pass out from hunger?
I have a buy question. What about the Amistad funds that we sold? If we did senior housing, I think that would fall within that parameter. Could we rely on that? And number 2, how much is left in our endowment funds that we could borrow from our endowment funds so that we don't have to do a capital campaign?
Scott, please.
So answer to your part 1 question is yes. One of the bylaws requirements of the articles requirements of BPF is that the money be spent on seniors, people with disabilities in Berkeley. So that would be a perfect fit. Berkeley Pilgrims Foundation currently has assets of about $3 million, and 2 of it is liquid. So yes, that could be done as a contribution into senior housing development. If necessary, certainly could be used for some sort of friendly support for construction of whatever occurs here on the campus. On the endowment, Mo is knitting his brow, and he's going to have to get back to you on that.
Does this work?
Yeah, if we use the endowment, I mean, we have it all committed. We'd have to change the rules. And but if we use it as an investment, it would have to return, have a decent return. So it would have to be some kind of a loan, but we could do that.
We are 30 minutes behind. Paul, I see your hand that you've asked 2 questions. I'm just trying to find some people that have not spoken yet.
Everyone take a breath. And I want you to discern whether the question you're going to ask is moving the conversation forward or is going to help supply a critical piece of information.
Well, I think that my question is going to be as critical as a lot of others. It's actually not a question. It's a suggestion or maybe a clarification. So you made the point that you haven't seen a lot of people say, yes, I'm willing to commit to the thrift shop, by working in it and that kind of thing. But I'm not aware that there was ever that question asked, right? Yeah.
So thank you for clarifying. Yeah, Bob has been dedicating time and has had several meetings on that and reporting only partially how far he's gotten. He could probably answer that with more detail. But I'm happy to ask that question and get the input.
That's still, the thrift shop is still in context to the expanded, to option 2, correct? So what I hear, there's a lot of and let's be clear that, you know, we're trying to identify, like, well, what if? There are lots of different options. But I think, and this is what's the challenge of our dialogue today, is that on one hand, you're indicating your preference, and to know that option 1 is not expanding your space. Option 1 is not expanding the space, correct? Option 2 is expanding your space, where there are a lot of opportunities to have various ministries continue to grow and evolve. Is that correct?
Yes, that is a general overview of the options that are before us. As we discuss the space as a critical element, keep in mind that the existing building is going to be retrofitted with ADA bathrooms, accessible entrances, and an elevator, and seismic strengthening. And the interior space is actually going to decrease through these improvements. Maybe not by a huge margin, but it's going to change and it will get smaller. That is the option to go with the least cost and least time to completion. And there's a spectrum from adding nothing to adding 10,000 or 20,000 square feet. And we can put as many things, we can have a cafe and a thrift shop and offices and volunteer space and a big kitchen. Or we can have just a few of those things. So again, concepts are presented, think about it.
But I also want to say that indicating your preference for one option or for option either 1 or 2, because I'm hearing the question about the thrift shop and other things. So we're not indicating whether or not that ministry is going to continue. That's a whole other conversation, right? So I want to clarify that, so that people don't feel that they have to indicate their preference about whether or not a specific ministry is going to either be in existence. I think that's really important, because I hear anxiety and I'm hearing a desire to, like, well, what are we going to do about this particular ministry? And I want to invite us to that we're holding that, you know, God is calling you and ministries in a particular way. Right? I think it's important. And your hand has been up for a very long time.
Okay, I've actually got a microphone here. And I just want to say thanks, first of all, to Molly and to Amy and Scott for presenting this whole issue about affordable housing. I've been aware of that, having been a Berkeley resident for a long time, but until you all spoke out on that, I wasn't really dialed in, and I thank you for that. It means a lot. I'm seeing this city in different ways now. From your presentation, what I'm taking away is that that's a very strategic option for us, but it is, the way you put it up there, Scott, it's a phased development. And that first line brings me back to options 1 and 2. So forgive me, but I would suggest that I don't think we've got, therefore, 3 options on the table. I'd like to ask that there be better attention to what I call a remodel or a restoration. Mo, this is your continuum extended. I think if you look at details, you could imagine how the space could be developed. And the last comments I'll make about our time and money. Milton's here. I think Milton has put up in front of the congregation some numbers. I'm just going to pick one of them. $2.5 million was the outside range. Of his last presentation, and I've got a sheet from FRC. We're trying to track the numbers so that decisions can be grounded in financial reality. Forgive me, I'm from the Midwest, and that's really in my DNA. You gotta know what it's gonna cost, what your dream is gonna cost. So, last comment is, capital campaigns. I was part of the seismic retrofit campaign. We did it. It was $1.25 million. Could we raise maybe $2.5 million? Consultants would tell us multiply your annual giving by 3. It's within range. The last thing I'd say is time is money. We know this. We're in a hot market, and architects say construction costs can go up 10% a year. So the longer time frame means higher cost. It's a complicated process. I just want to conclude by thanking Dan for leading the process. I've learned a lot today. Again, I hope you'll consider this interim mid-range option as you go with the process. Thank you.
I feel the eagerness to get to lunch. I am myself experiencing it. I just want to respond to something Paul said, which is that, well, a couple things. Yes, we can do a capital campaign. We can start it right away. We can probably get 2.4 million because our annual giving is about 800,000 in pledges. We would be spending every single penny on an expanded option for Pilgrim Hall if we didn't have other revenue streams coming on board. It would take a lot of staff attention and time and volunteer time and attention in, when we're still very early in my tenure, when there are so many other things we wanted to focus on, when we have a building campaign and other things. I'm not at all opposed to doing a capital campaign, but I want us to consider carefully if that is going to be our only revenue stream and we're sort of hanging our hats entirely on that. And I had another thought, but it's gone, probably from low blood sugar.
I think we should eat burritos and talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. All right, so we're just going to eat.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to invite you to sit with people that you don't know and discuss the question about what is God calling First Church to do over the next 20 minutes.